Welcome to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. We continue to be shut in, locked down, sheltering in place, possibly going a little stir crazy and looking for ways to entertain ourselves and each other. So Story Hour turns to the second oldest form of entertainment in human history, which is basically a couple of people sitting around the fire telling lies. So each week, 2 writers, 30 minutes each. That's it. Not a speck of cereal. So you can stay posted about upcoming authors at storyhour2020.com. But one thing that's really cool about hosting Story Hour is that I get to invite my friends to read. So we're very fortunate to have Nisi Shawl here tonight. And I'll say a little more about Nisi when I hand the baton over to her at the midway point. If you're here via Zoom, please mute your mic, but feel free to leave your camera on if you're so inclined, and feel free to use chat. Our Facebook Live friends, feel free to comment as well, although of course we can't see you. So I'm going to read a story called An Orange for Lucita. It's pretty short. If there's time, I may read another even shorter piece, but we'll see. The sooner we get to Nisi, the better. So as far as I'm concerned. So here we go. An Orange for Lucita. It was Monday, and I knew that my son Pablo would be out of jail by noon and breaking into my house that night. So I left the kitchen door open and 2 $20 bills on the counter. I wanted to leave more, but I still needed to buy groceries and pay the electric bill. I wanted to see him, but I knew that if I was awake and he saw me, he would not come in for shame. I thought about leaving him a note, but there was little I could say that he could hear. You will always be my little boy. I will always love you. No. Some things cannot be said or must be said with $40 and an unlocked door instead of words. I put a half loaf of good crusty bread and a chunk of hard cheese next to the bills and walked to the back door. It was open, the screen door shut. Beyond the door, my small cement patio, a cinder block fence, the moonless night. It was late, but still I heard fireworks and an occasional gunshot, laughter and breaking glass, the distant highway hum. The town of Zapata, Texas, gearing up for Dia de los Muertos. The air was cool and smelled of mesquite with a touch of burning plastic from the Bakelite factory on the other side of downtown. I stood there for a few moments longer, thinking of Pablo, wondering where he was and hoping that he wouldn't get too drunk or hopped up before coming to steal from his mother. I will always love you, Pablo. You are still my little boy. I closed the door, leaving the deadbolt open. I got a bottle of beer from the refrigerator and put a piece of chorizo and a dollop of beans on one of my good plates, thick and heavy with a deep blue glaze. I carried the plate and the bottle into the small living room and set them on the carpet in front of Devante's altar. I let myself look at his photograph, his handsome face squinting into the sun, the ocean behind him. In front of Devante, a few smooth stones from the beach at Laguna Madre. His badge, the keys to his motorcycle that I could not bring myself to sell. It remained in the garage under a tarp, along with several boxes of his clothes and a set of good tools. I didn't go in there much anymore. This was to be my first day of the dead without my Devante since before we were married. 27 years, longer than my son is old. Good night, Devante, I whispered. I prepared for bed slowly. One part of me wanted to stay up long enough to hear Pablo come in. I could not go out to speak to him. He would be drunk or high, full of shame at the sight of me. The shame would turn to anger and we would fight. I didn't want that. Not ever, but especially not that night. But I wanted to hear his footsteps, his passage through the house. Several nights before, I had just put up Devante's altar. I heard Pablo padding softly through the house looking for something to steal. The footsteps stopped in the living room. I heard him sigh, and then sounds that might have been weeping. There was another part of me that simply did not want La Dia de los Muertos to come. The idea, of course, is that we banish our fear of La Muerte by welcoming her as a friend and taking to the streets with her. Devante's job put him close with death many times, and because of that, I think, he loved the day. But I did not feel that way. Death had taken everything from me. I hated her. I slipped beneath the covers on my half of the bed. I usually do not remember my dreams, but that night I dreamed vividly. I was walking down a hill studded with flowers. The air was thick with butterflies. At the bottom of the hill was a lake. A long pier stretched out into the water. As I walked toward the lake, a butterfly landed on my wrist. It was huge, its wings the size of playing cards. It flapped them once and was still. "Hello, little one," I said. "Lucita," it said. Its voice was deep and mellifluous, like a television announcer. It flapped its wings again and flew away, darting left, darting right, gone. I walked out to the end of the pier and looked down into the water. I saw reflected on the water's surface a great pair of wings folded in a V shape, framing the bright sun. A small round head, feathery antennae, delicate as milkweed. I flapped my wings and the pier fell away beneath my feet. When I awoke, I lay in bed for a few minutes, full of this dream. The Aztecs believed that the souls of the departed reside on earth in butterflies and birds. I am 1/4 Aztec, and I know this to be true. Still, I did not understand what the dream was trying to tell me. Was I about to die? My stomach clenched in fear. Who would leave bread and cheese for my drunken son? I didn't think that was it, though. I think the dream was showing me something else, but I did not know what. I got out of bed, performed my morning rituals. In the living room, the beer and food were gone from the altar. In their place, a beautiful papier-mâché butterfly, red and black wings the size of dinner plates. Pablo. I smiled and shook my head. This was a strange conversation, but better than none at all. In the kitchen, of course, the money, the bread, the cheese, all gone. Be well, Pablo, I thought. I would have liked for us to be together on this day, to remember together his father, but that would not happen. As I stood there in the kitchen, bright with morning light, I remembered a day from his childhood. I don't know why I thought of this particular day, because although it was a good day, it was not a particularly good day, just one of the thousands that we string together to make our lives. We had spent the day at the shore and returned tired, sweaty, our clothes full of beach grit. I cleaned the perch Pablo and Devante had caught while they sat at the kitchen table, shirtless, joking back and forth, drinking glass after glass of ice water. Pablo looked like a miniature version of his father, the same smile, the same gestures. That was it. That was what I remembered. The tight feeling in my forehead from too much sun, my hands slick with blood from the fish, the sharp smell of its organs. Pablo and Devante like echoes of one another, smiling, laughing. For a moment, it was as if I was actually there, back in that day again, and they were there with me. I shook my head, filled with sudden anger, La Muerta toying with me. Not today, I thought, not now. I will not give you my sorrow. There was a knock on the front door. As I walked through the living room, I saw a police car through the window, so I was somewhat prepared when I saw Fernando Garcia Luna, who worked for Devante before he died and was now chief of police. He had his hat in his hand, and his expression was grave. Hello, Lucita. What's happened to Pablo? He looked away, then returned his eyes to mine. He had known Pablo all his life, had coached his Little League team, had helped him out many times when Pablo was too addled to help himself. Pablo was apparently sleeping in the road up on County 6 and was struck by a newspaper truck. He was dragged several hundred feet before the driver realized. Dark patches swam in my vision. Fernando's voice sounded far away. I leaned against the door jamb for support. I felt his hand on my elbow. Lucita, he said. He is alive. A weight left my chest. I sobbed, and he put his arms around me. It had been a long time since I'd been held by a man. There was nothing of a lewd nature in our embrace, just his warmth, his breathing, the smell of his aftershave, a different brand than Devante had used, equally unpleasant, but oddly comforting. I did not want to be a burden, the hysterical woman, so I made an effort to compose myself and pulled back. He kept his hands on my shoulders, as if to keep me from taking flight. He is alive, he repeated, but he is very badly injured. Many broken bones, his side laid open from being dragged for so long, internal damage. He is in the intensive care ward at St. Francis. I can take you there if you like. I nodded quickly. Thank you, Fernand. I never liked the smell of the inside of a police car. Gun lubricant and Lysol, spilled coffee. From behind the wire mesh separating front and back seats, the faint smell of unwashed bodies. I did not allow Devante to take me anywhere in the police car, even if it was convenient to do so. None of that bothered me this time. I could think only of Pablo. I noticed a flickering in the air all around us, and it took me a moment to realize that it was butterflies, our butterflies, back from the north for the winter protection of the Oyamel fir trees. I remembered my dream, and had I not been sick with worry, I would have smiled. The monarchs, I said to Fernando. Yes, he said, a little sadly, not as many as last year. And then not as many as the year before. I think the pollution is killing them. It's good to see them, though. Revelers were already flocking the streets, even though it was still morning. Fernando drove slowly past a procession of ghouls, faces grease paint white with black circles around the eyes, dressed in black shredded suits. At the front of this small parade, 4 ghouls carried an open coffin. A young man in street clothes was sitting up in the coffin, drinking from a brown paper bag and shouting directions to his pallbearers. Oranges and flowers were piled and scattered around him in the coffin. Several children dressed as skeletons capered about the procession like dogs worrying a flock of sheep. On the sidewalk, a mummy in ragged bandages kept pace, moaning melodramatically and dragging one leg behind. We passed 2 similar processions on the way to the hospital. With Fernando leading the way, I was allowed to see Pablo immediately. He was surrounded by machines, threaded with tubes and wires. The bandages swaddling his head were mottled with irregular purple stains. There was a slit in the bandages for his eyes, but they were closed. The machines hummed and whirred. Fernando brought me a chair, and I sat next to Pablo, holding his unbandaged hand. I don't know how much time passed. I am sure Fernando said something before he left, but I don't remember what. Nurses in crisp white habits came to check the instruments from time to time. I was empty of thought and memory. There was only Pablo and me and the machines. I must have dozed off because I realized suddenly that someone was speaking to me. Take him to surgery now. An elderly man with a round face leaned towards me, spectacles perched halfway down his bulbous nose. He wore a white coat and smelled of expensive cologne. A stethoscope dangled from around his neck. You can wait in the lounge on the first floor, or leave your phone number with the nurse and we'll call you. What's going on? Will he be all right? He pursed his lips. I can't tell you that. We'll probably have to remove his spleen at the very least. Beyond that, we'll have to just see what we find when we go in. When we go in. I waited, hoping he had more to tell me, but he was done. I'll wait, I said. They wheeled Pablo away, and one of the sisters took me to the lounge. There was a television and several vending machines. A man in a skeleton costume sat on one of the couches, his face covered in grease paint to resemble a skull. He was perched on the edge of the couch like he was about to rise. He looked at me as I entered the room, his eyes moist pools set within circles of black. I nodded, and he nodded back, but he did not smile. I will tell you if there's any news, the sister said. Thank you. I took a seat near the door and stared blankly at the television. The sound was a low murmur. Pale, ghostly images chased each other across the screen. I looked at the skeleton man again. He was staring off into space, still balanced on the edge of the couch. After a while, a sister came in the room, a young girl in tow, and approached the skeleton man. He stood up, very tall, and bent down to the little girl. He said something I did not hear, nodded gravely, and offered his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she reached out and grabbed onto his index finger. Together, they left the room. A little while later, a heavy woman in jeans and a hooded sweatshirt came in with an infant bundled in a colorful blanket. She smiled at me, and I nodded back. Time passed as it does in waiting rooms. The transit of strangers intersecting with smiles and nods. The skeleton man returned, alone, and sat across from me. Where is your friend? I asked. Esmeralda? His voice was low and soft. A very sweet girl. She is with her family. I nodded again. I wanted to say something else to him, but I did not know what to say. I felt suddenly nauseated with the close hospital smell. I could feel La Muerta all around me, in the waiting room, in the hospital rising above me, each room a nexus of suffering. I stood up. I need to get some air, I said. He smiled gently. Don't worry, he said. Outside, La Dia was in full swing. Firecrackers and gunshots echoed in the small street surrounding the hospital. Butterflies filled the air with flickering motion. A mock funeral procession made its way down the street in front of the hospital entrance. I moved closer to get a better look. As I approached the head of the procession, it stopped, and the pallbearers set the coffin gently on the street. They smiled shyly at me and stepped aside. Sitting in the coffin, propped up against a satin pillow, my Devante. He wore his funeral suit, midnight blue with gray pinstripes. He brushed his curly black hair away from his forehead in a gesture that was uniquely his, and smiled sadly at me. On his forehead was a puckered scar the size of a nickel from the bullet that had taken his life. I opened my mouth to speak, and he raised his hand to me, palm out, another Devante gesture. Then he reached under the satin bedding, brought out an orange, and handed it to me. It was a good one, large and round, its pebbled skin unblemished. When I looked up again, Devante's funeral procession was gone. I felt a feather touch on my wrist. I looked down. A butterfly rested there, wings spread. Oh, God, I thought, please, who are you? Devante, my Pablo? Please, please, not Pablo, not Pablo. Hello, little one, I croaked. Lucita. I jumped and whirled around. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the butterfly darting left, darting right, gone. Fernando put his hands on my shoulders. Lucita, he said again. I had just spoken with the doctors. Pablo is going to be all right. The recovery will be long and difficult, but he will live. I stepped back. Fernando's hands fell to his sides. I looked down at the orange again, wrapped both my hands around it and squeezed gently. It was firm and slightly yielding, warm as if full of blood. That's it.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, everybody. So, on to Nisi. Yeah, I have another shorter story I might read, but I don't think I want to break the mood. I'm not sure I can dive in again after that. I'm really excited to share this time with Nisi tonight. Our friendship goes back nearly 30 years. You realize that, Nisi?
Yeah.
Yeah. We were classmates at Clarion West. We became friends very early on in that cauldron of creative intensity. And first day or so, we kind of looked askance at each other and kind of wondering what to expect of each other. But we became fast friends very quickly and have remained good friends to this day. So for those of you who don't know Nisi, they are an African-American writer, editor, and journalist. They are best known for their science fiction and fantasy dealing with gender, race, colonialism, including the Nebula finalist novel Everfair. And if you have not had the chance to read that, you should check it out. It's really a great book. Their most recent editing credit is New Sons, original speculative fiction by people of color. Their most recent fiction publication is the collection Talk Like a Man, part of PM Press's Outspoken Author series. And that is a great series. She is in great company, and they are in great company with Nisi. They live in Seattle, where they also write nonfiction for the Seattle Times and the Seattle Review of Books. So, Nisi Shawl, over to you.
All right. Sort of over to me, if you're going to help me with this.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So a while back, I made a vow that whenever I read, I will sing a song, or at least part of a song that has to do with the story. So this story is called But She's Only a Dream. It's inspired by a book by Thomas Pynchon called V, or a section of that book anyway. And a recording of Lester Young doing a children's folk song, a nursery rhyme song called Lavender Blue. And Dan and I are gonna do a version of that for you.
Let's get a note.
You choose it.
Lavender blue,
dilly dilly,
lavender green. I'll be your king, dilly
dilly, when I am queen.
Who told me so, dilly dilly? Who told me so?
Was my own heart, dilly dilly, that told me so. An old man named Roscoe reminisces, tilting his chair back as the sun sets. She must have been from somewhere around here. Kansas City ain't that big a town, but no one ever seen her except at jam sessions and gigs. Sitting by, listening in, never lifting her voice above what was ladylike to speak, let alone trying to sing. She was always pretty much a mystery to everyone. Darktown pops and sizzles like a bonfire, but daytimes the flame's invisible. Charcoal and ash flicker to the strobe, faces grimace and turn to it, scarves snap to it, newspapers crackle to the nameless music of the streets. This is a frantic song, a 60 cycle a second scuffle. Not till evening does the light mellow. Then golden horns fill certain cellars with a smooth hush, a yellow melody rising from below linked shadows. The soft sounds spill upwards, pooling at the feet of passers-by. Laura seems a little nervous standing there on the sidewalk, tugging at her hat, her clothes, her hair. Yet she is perfect, lipstick even, stocking seams straight, beige and brown dotted hem swirling just so, brown pumps clicking just right down the cement steps. She opens the door on a room full of men and instruments. Already the dampness is warming with body heat. They have traded axes, goofing themselves loose. Winks and nods greet her entry, and she smiles in return, working her way to the sofa at the far end of the room. A skinny, coal-colored youth sits there restlessly, waiting for the games to end. It isn't long. First, a slow blues. Then, just you, just me, and they're really cooking. Smells good. Laura weaves her head in time to the fumes, delicate nostrils wide with pleasure. The next tune, a rhythm and blues, starts out at a medium tempo, but the drummer winds it up midway to a fast burn. At different times, different musicians glance at Laura to see the music made visible. Her black eyes are afire with secrets. During their break, the cellar darkens with smoke and brightens with talk, most of it about the foregoing jams. Laura doesn't say too much. Once in a while, yes, I liked that, or, it was real nice. Her voice is quiet, her words proper. Occasionally, a man throws his arm over her shoulders, gives her a friendly squeeze, and her slight smile slightens. Everyone knows when it's time to go back to work and play. Springs sigh, sheet music shuffles, places are resumed. Laura listens feverishly, her small pointed chin cupped in one hand, elbow balanced on one knee. She can only stay for 2 more songs. Her mouth looks unsatisfied as she leaves. Later, boys. In a minute, Laura. She doesn't walk far, scared of the dark, even the brilliant darkness of the black folks' wide grinning night. She hails the first cab she sees, gives a fancy uptown address. The cabbie drives her right to the servants' entrance. She shorts him 50 cents on the fare. If you wants to wait, I'll get de rest from Miss Anne, she says. He snorts, but what can he do, drive her back? She goes upstairs to the empty boudoir next to the master bedroom. The decor is severely pink, scented, and stiffly starched. She sits at a marble-topped vanity, its surface a mirrored intricacy of shiny vials and pots. She opens a large alabaster box, smooths a transparent cream on her already creamy skin. A man calls through the door without opening it. Hey, honey, that you? Yes, it's me. She pulls a pink tissue from a shell-covered box. You've been at that meeting this entire time? She wipes quickly, cleaning half her face. Yes, I have. She looks long at her reflection. She is half full. She takes another tissue to her face. She is waxing. We had a lot of work to do. Bazaar's coming up. You know those poor people depend on us organizing it. How you women can talk all night about a miserable bunch of niggers is beyond me. She was always pretty much a mystery to everyone. Okie doke, smoke. The cabbie slipped the worn dollar bill into his shirt pocket. He had his full fare now and a 50-cent tip. That ain't my name. The skinny, coal-colored youth turned away from the cab he had followed all the way from Darktown. Who said it was your name? Backing down the drive, the cabbie kept his eyes on the street end. He missed seeing how the coal-colored youth melted into the shadows, went around the corner of the house, walked up the steps, seeking something that he sometimes got a taste of at jam sessions. A pause while he did something to the lock without using a key. Then, through the door. Inside, the large kitchen lay mostly dark. Light from a far-off street lamp filtered through white net curtains over a counter on one side. Straight ahead, a glow silhouetted a door and leaked out over blue and green linoleum tiles. The skinny youth pushed the door and it swung open on a passageway with oyster white walls, tastefully carpeted in beige. The same carpet ran up the staircase. So did he, quietly. The stairs doubled back on themselves and left him on the landing where they ended, facing the front of the house. 2 doors. He closed his eyes and followed his nose through the one on his left. She was in there, seated at the vanity. She swiveled on the pink bench as he entered, giving him the look of a wild thing surprised in its natural habitat, but still sure of escape. A silk robe embroidered with rose and coral chrysanthemums clung to the new ivory of her shoulders. "Laura," he whispered. "That ain't my name." He shook his head. Didn't matter what she called herself here or how much paler her face. Whatever trick she played, he would know her anywhere. She was it, inspiration, the breath of air that fed the fire. He took a step closer, drawn by her scent, a mixture of fine cologne and fresh, faint sweat. "My husband's in the next room. I can call him, but you won't. Be a shame if anybody found you in a white woman's boudoir." "Who said you was white?" She swung her legs around and planted them firmly before her, placed one hand between her knees and pressed the knees tight together. Touched the other hand to her loose, lustrous hair, silken as the robe. "I did. I said it." He shook his head once more. "I ain't come to cause no trouble." The bare skin above her breast rose and fell sharply as she let out a silent, humorless laugh. "Why then? You followed me home from that jam session somehow. You broke in." "No, I didn't. Didn't have to. Door was left open. I locked it." "Must have been someone else come in after you. Maid." "Annie would never neglect a thing like that. And your husband wouldn't ever enter this room unless you asked him in. I know. You took care of him good as your servants. Wouldn't never believe he married no colored gal, neither, unless you told him so." Or would he? She rose slowly, her hands swinging naturally at her sides. The right one held a gun now, but not as if she planned on doing anything immediate with it. "Why don't you stop making these threatening remarks and tell me what it is you want?" "Honey, are you coming to bed now?" "I'll be in soon, Chester," she called back, her voice loose and flowing as her hair. "Who's that I hear you talking to?" The man on the other side of the open door sounded nearer now. "It's only Annie. She's helping me practice my part for the church play." She used the gun like a traffic cop's baton, waving the youth toward another door opposite the one her husband stood behind. It was shut. He opened it on a tiny bathroom, obeyed her gestures, and went inside. "I thought you gave Annie the evening off." "I guess she didn't have anywhere to go. We're as good as done, so I'll be right in after I use the necessary." She stepped into the small room and closed the door behind her with a soft click. An overhead light came on as her hand fell from the wall switch. The gun's muzzle pointed at him, almost, it seemed, of its own will. The opening glittered like an animal's eye. "I asked you before." "What?" "What I want?" The stories he had heard agreed on one thing. This was no one to trifle with. He hesitated before the truth surged out of him, a wave desperate to reach an unknown shore. "I want to play." "Play what?" All the music, the sweetness, sharpness, rolls and riffs and changes he'd ever heard swept through his mind. All the instruments. Choose one. She was waiting. "Piano." She looked at the mirror over the white washstand, smiled at a joke shared with her reflection. "And what present did you bring me?" The gun still pointed in his direction. In my coat pocket. He moved to ease open the satin-hemmed slit above his breast, and her eyes were on him again. Hands, she said. Reluctantly, he started to raise them. No, the gun waved impatiently. Hold them out here where I can see them. Barely a tremor showed as he stretched his forearms level with the floor, his fingers long and thin, black as twigs burnt bare by autumn, nails ridged and trimmed to neat ovals. Turn him over. His palms, rose-creased with brown, oblong seeming small in contrast to the fingers' spidery length. All right, in the tub, take your shoes off. He hesitated. Take them off first, then get in. He wore black lace-up Oxfords, ancient but well-polished. He left them on the white tiles, climbed over the tub's curled porcelain lip, slipping awkwardly in his socks. Now strip. He did nothing, as if unsure he'd heard her right. Off with your clothes, unless you brought a spare set. He shrugged out of his jacket, a good jacket, dark gray with faint cross-hatching of light blue. Folded it carefully, then looked around to see what to do with it. Balanced it on the tub's edge at one tightly curving end. Loosened his tie and slipped it off from under the collar of his pale gray shirt. Unbuttoned that. Stopped. The thin cotton tee he wore beneath the shirt barely veiled the darkness of his chest. What? Lie down. She swept the gun's muzzle sideways, describing a horizontal line for him to imitate. You want to keep your clothes on? That's fine by me. I don't care about them if you don't. Me, I like what I'm wearing. As she said this, she unbelted the kimono and let it slide off her shoulders. Beneath, she was naked. She held herself the way she now held the gun, purposefully. The parchment of her skin glowed like a lampshade, color breaking out where the candle's flame came too close to it, burning it pink and red and brown and black. Her fingernails, the taut tips of her breasts, her hair. Lie down. Limbs weak. He did as she said. It was easiest that way. He curled up on his right side, the drain gaping at the upper edge of his peripheral vision. He heard a cool ceramic whisper as she stepped into the tub and slid down beside him. Facing him, lying on her left, looking directly into his eyes. It was a tight fit. He regretted every stitch he wore. Laughing, she lifted the gun above both their heads, rotating it as if displaying a rare device for his edification. Nickel glinted in the fixture's light. It seemed to be a perfectly ordinary gun. Where do you want me to put them? She asked. At first he could only gape at her, head empty as the tub's drain. You're gonna put what? The bullets, the magic. She frowned as if trying to remember the answer to a tough question. You want me to shoot you, right? No, I ain't said nothing like that. Sweat slicked his skin, robbing him of traction as he scrabbled at the tub's sides, trying to get out. He opened his mouth wider, sucking in air for a scream. She filled it with the gun's muzzle. You want to sing too? All right. The knuckles stood out sharply on her gun hand. The frown deepened, cutting 2 deep verticals in her low forehead. Wait. The world did as she commanded. My present, I haven't seen it yet. Maybe it's not enough, not worth what you want. A hero's death, a musician's life. Let me have a look at my present first. He lay motionless. Go on, get out my present for me. She pulled the gun's barrel from his mouth and swung it in a short arc, indicating the youth's jacket resting on the bathtub's rim. Then aimed it back at him. Cold with drying perspiration, the youth raised one arm and dragged the coat down on top of him. From its inner pocket, he removed a posy of pink and yellow rosebuds, their stems arranged in a crystal vial capped with a gold screen. The flowers were in not quite pristine condition, a few barely opened petals crushed and darkened. "Oh," she said. "Well, it is the thought that counts. Under these circumstances, and it's at least you brought something." She took the posy with her left hand, inhaling deeply. You mean you ain't gonna shoot me?" He levered himself up on one elbow, shivering slightly. "Shh, hold still now. I don't know if I should. Let me think. Lie back down." Through all this, she'd kept the gun trained on him, unwavering. He lowered himself to the tub's floor. "I like you," she said, smiling. "Even if you did lie to me about the door being open. Might as well have been. All right, tell you what." She cocked the pistol's hammer, pointed it at the ceiling, the light. "Best I can do." An explosion, brightness, blackness. Combustion combines opposites, earth and air. Chemical secrets release the energies held inside dull matter. Some fires are fast, some slow as rust. Consumption, greed, fever, lust. As if he can look through himself, as if the flame has licked away what no longer matters, left only that loud sound blowing through him, lines of incandescence leading to and from his heart. He's still in the tub with her. She still holds the gun. A whiff of powder, the curled question mark of smoke, static in the air above them. And how can he tell that in the dark? The radiant dark, emptiness shining, the shot's echoes dying down, the light fixture's glass tinkling into silence. Then the sound of the door opening. The darkness vanishes, and everything he imagined seeing in it, smoking gun, naked woman, tub, walls, ceiling. He's in another place. A bed in another room, illuminated from outside by whatever lies beyond. Only the door remains, and the shadow standing just inside it. A woman's silhouette. "Laura? That ain't my name. You feeling any better, Chester?" "Yeah? What happened?" He tries to raise his head, like hoisting a steamroller on pulleys made from putty. He gives it up. "Guess you must not be all the way recovered yet. You don't remember what your wife called." "My what?" The woman walks toward him and switches on a lamp, sitting on the table beside the bed. His bed? His wife? The lamp's bulb seems too dim, but it glares in his eyes anyway, obscuring her face. The mattress tilts, slopping his stomach to one side. She's sitting on its edge. Now he can see her. Her face is not exactly no, but a lot like Laura's. Same skin tone as when she showed up at jam sessions. Same general shape. So what's different? He can't put his finger on it. Eyebrows thicker, hairline higher, faint imprints around the mouth and eyes. "At least you're talking English again." The woman presses her lips together. Are they fuller? Thinner? "You shaman? You can't have forgot. I'm your Annie, and," with the firmness of a doe licking a newborn fawn into shape, "we married in the eyes of God and the law. 5 years now." 5 years. He would have been what? 12 years old? 11? Frantically, he tries to get up, get out of bed. He has to find a mirror. Hoarse, hacking coughs convulse him, and the woman, Annie, shoves pillows under his back, props him up, holds him like a baby against her rose and coral housecoat. At last, he quiets down a bit and she offers him a drink. Water, he assumes, and swallows a mouthful of vodka. That sets him off again, though not so bad as before. This time, Annie only watches. And when she most likely thinks he isn't looking, she slips something from her pocket, something small and shiny with a nickel glint to it, and slides it inside the drawer of the table by their bed. He gets his voice back. How long? You've been out 2 days, Chester. I was all set to take you to the hospital. She strokes one pajama-clad shoulder in a gesture meant to soothe him, which is when he realizes his shirt and pants are gone and the things he'd carried in their pockets. Wallet, keys, money, gone. Where? His wife will know. With an effort, he refocuses on what she's trying to tell him. Ain't missed one gig, that's what she's so concerned about. Rehearsal, sure, but you're going to be fine for that agent tomorrow. He ain't interested in no one else in the band anyway. Even I figured out that much. The agent from New York, tomorrow afternoon. How can he have forgotten? He knocks the covers off clumsily, attempts to swing his feet to the carpet. The sheets cling to his night clothes, charged with electricity from rubbing up against them in the dry air of a Chicago winter. Help me, Annie. Chester, you can't get up now. You a sick man. The wallpaper wobbles, its printed flowers waving in an invisible breeze. I need to practice. Help me. Gotta get me to the piano. Then I'll be all right. Slowly, leaning on Annie's arm, he makes his way to the living room where the slick black baby grand waits. It had cost a lot of money, and it takes up too much space in their little mortgage to the hilt South Side bungalow. In its polished surface, he sees himself, hair dark, chin like a chisel. He is young yet, yes, still young, only 25. Why has he been so worried? Sick, that's why. Annie uncovers the keys and he lets his hands fall where they want to be. A song based on a nursery rhyme. The music rises up, baking the ache from his bones. Lavender blue, a Latin beat, a rumba, banishing the chill pouring in off the big front window, and his fingers sparkle. His fingers sparkle, laughing, living sunbeams, and all the colors of the spectrum break through him like he was a prism. All the music, the sweetness, sharpness, rolls and riffs and changes coming out of him. He is the king. She leans on the piano's shining lid, relaxing slowly, melting like wax against her own reflection, arms stretching out softly, head resting on one side, ear to the sounding board, eyes closed, absorbing the music. Now she is queen. When the song is over, he looks up at her, at the way her lashes flutter open on black depths, too profound ever to be filled, and allows himself, for the last time, to remember the way things were before. And just for that final moment, to wonder why she has struck such an uneven bargain with him. She was always pretty much a mystery to everyone. That's it. Done.
What a great story. Thank you, Nisi. That was awesome.
Oh, thank you. Oh, look, there's stuff in a chat.
Oh, I haven't looked in the chat for a while. What's the deal?
That was super great, Nisi.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, wonderful. Both of you, thank you.
Oh, Shane is here. Woohoo.
All right.
Hi, Rachel. Yeah, that was from a particular time in my life. I read V from cover to cover when I was like 10 years old. No, younger. I had to be younger, maybe 8.
I read it as a young teenager. I really didn't get it at all.
I did not get it at all. I found it in the headboard of my parents' bed, and I thought it must be a dirty book. So I kept reading it, trying to find the dirty part.
Neat. Let's see. It's not the alligators in the sewers. It's not. What do they do down there? I don't know. Anyway, well, thank you so much, Nisi. It was a great reading and a great story. Thanks everybody for coming. My obligatory PSA follows. If you are fortunate enough to be in a position to be able to help others during the coronavirus crisis, I'd like to ask you to please consider nokidhungry.org, which helps feed kids in need who are missing school meals during the closures. nokidhungry.org. So thanks. Next week, our guest author will be Amy Wolf and one other person who's TBA, which is really code for I really got to get my scheduling shit together. But also, I mean, this is not like a one-shot deal. Authors who have read are encouraged to come back, read again. This is, just shout out, you know where to find me. So I'd like to keep this going for a long time, and without people coming back, we may run out of writers. So just if you want to read again, please come on back, and stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Dan.
Daniel.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye, folks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. 2 awesome stories.
Thanks, Cliff.